Hey everybody, welcome back to another December Daily video. I'm Amy Gretchen and this is from the year 2022 and I'm going to be working on days 22 and 23. So not to confuse you too much, but I'm actually going to be starting with day 23. And I can't remember why, but I believe I created this day first. I think I thought it was going to be day 22 in my album, and then I remembered it was going to be day 23. So we're just going to do it as I created it. And so let's just go from here. I do want to give a little disclaimer in that this is definitely a little bit longer of a video because day 23 is a little bit more involved. This may be something that you do want to try or don't want to try, but at any rate, it was a lot of fun and definitely you could put this in any album. Of course, this is measured to fit with a 4x6 album, or actually my album is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You could add this to a 6 by, one of the 6x8s or one of the larger albums. I am going to figure it out for the larger album. I have not yet done so. I've got a lot of travel coming up, so I've been trying to get these videos done so that I can have them scheduled to get up on YouTube. But I will work on it and you may not see it until maybe November, but I promise you that I will do some measurements that would fit better in a 6x8 album, and that way, your photos and your journaling and everything could just be a little bit bigger. So look for that coming up, but it's going to be a little while before that comes out because I'm going to be gone a lot in the month of October. All right, so let's start with day 23. You can see that I am in the middle of working on it. So what I've got in front of me is some cardstock. It's 80-pound cardstock, and I took a stamp and I stamped with some VersaMark ink, which is clear. It's a sticky ink, and I'm adding some embossing powder. This is some gold embossing powder on top. And you'll see that I'm going to melt that. But before I do that, I'm actually going to just knock off a little bit more of the powder, trying to clean it off the best that I can. I believe this stamp is from Simon Says Stamp. It is from several years ago, but if I can find something similar, I will definitely have it linked below. So you can see that I'm putting some heat on it. And if you don't know anything about embossing powder, it's super awesome in that it melts when it comes in contact with the heat, and then it leaves a raised edge, and it just looks super cool, especially when you're using like a gold or a silver. So you can see how that works. So basically I'm just creating my own pattern paper. You would definitely not need to do this. You could just create or just use a pattern paper and just stick it right on. You could actually use the pattern paper for the base if it's thick enough. You don't want it to be a thin pattern paper, but if it's thick enough, you could definitely just do that. And then you've got your pattern on the front and on the back, and then you don't have to worry about it. All right, so I pulled over the sample that I made. I believe I made this probably a few days before I actually put it together, and I was trying to remember what exactly I did. Honestly, this is why I make these, because I will never remember what I did from day to day. I did see something larger. Gosh, I ran into this maybe on a reel or something, and I thought it was really, really cool, but it was definitely a lot larger. And so I had to figure out how to make it smaller. And it was definitely very specific in that, I didn't want anything sticking out of the edge. So I did a lot of trial and error before I got the measurements exactly right. So let me tell you the measurements that I have here. I think it's so much easier to use a scoreboard if you have it, but you definitely do not need to do so. So this white piece of paper that I have here, and you can see that I have the journaling on the bottom because that's going to be the journaling for this piece. It's actually 2 inches by 6 3/4 of an inch. And the scores that I did were 1 5/8. So 1 5/8 all the way down. Of course, I did the center first, which was at 3 1/2. All right, so that was the piece that's going to pop out. And now I'm actually working on the piece that's going to adhere to our base. You can see that I created it in red as I was making the sample, but I really wanted to do it on white so you wouldn't be able to see it underneath. So this piece is 2 inches by 4 7/8 inches. And I know I'm being very specific, but like I said, it had to fit in just so. And the triangle that I'm going to make, or the X that I'm going to make, I need to have 1 inch from the center. And for whatever reason, I was trying to figure out what the exact center of 4 7/8 is. Instead of just folding it in half, which I actually end up just doing, I'm like, instead of trying to score it, I'm actually just going to fold it in half. And that way I know it's going to be exactly center. And so that's what I did. And then from the center mark, and sorry, I'm a little off screen here, but from the center mark, I'm going to measure measure 1 inch out on all sides. So I'm going to be making 4 marks. So just from the center, and I will say it may be the horizontal center. Just watch what I'm doing, because is it vertical? Is it horizontal? I don't know, but we're going to go 1 inch out, and this is going to create our X. And you'll see how I use my scoreboard to do that. Like I said, for projects like these, when you're working at like scoring paper, having a scoreboard, I find is essential. So you can see on my scoreboard right at 1.5, there's actually a darker line. And basically what I did is I took like a pencil and I made a marking, and that way I would be able to visually see where the line was. And you'll see that this is going to help in this regard, because I'm going to put one of the markings that I made on one side, like at the top, and then at the bottom, I'm going to combine them. And it's actually super hard to do, to figure out if something's on the same plane, unless you make that marking in the groove. And then it actually is really easy, because you just put one marking on the top and then one marking on the bottom, and then score, and then you've created an X that goes right through the center. It's funny, when I look at it, I actually was thinking to myself, those don't look like they're on the same groove, but they were, and that's exactly why I made that mark. So you may want to do that. It doesn't hurt it at all. So it just helps you with things like this. All right, so this is where I'm trying to figure out how it folds. And when I did this, I was like, wait, I know that is wrong. So of course I have to go back to my sample. I'm telling you, it is essential to go back to this sample. So let me show you what I ended up doing. I think I show you a little bit a better view. Here we go. So the 2 pieces on the side are going to fold down, and we want that triangle to go up. And you'll see that it kind of has like legs, like it moves. And I'll show you from side to side how it moves. And then we got the triangle on the top. So if it looks like this looks more like an arrow, and the other one, I don't know, I guess they both kind of look like an arrow. Just work at it until you make it look the way I made it look. It's so hard to try and describe what I'm doing. So that's why a video is so awesome. So you can just kind of see if those legs don't move, you're doing it wrong. So just go back and watch how I fold the sides down so that the triangle will come up. So this is the base. You can see that I've sped up the video a little bit, so hopefully you guys will still be able to follow along. I felt like this was pretty easy to do once you've got all the pieces in place. So we need to adhere this piece down to the base, because this is what's going to allow the movement of our accordion. So I'm marking the center because I want the accordion to be in the center, because of, like I said, all the measurements that I did is based on the center, so that nothing is going to come out. The accordion's not going to come out of the edges. So in my haste, I'm like, okay, I'm going to glue this down. I start to glue it down. And when I open it up, I noticed a couple of things. Number one, it was crooked. And number two, it was a little too close. But I also noticed something really essential, which is I didn't actually put my back, the paper that I wanted to put on the back. So you can see the paper that's off to the left. I want that to be on the back instead of it just being plain white. I want it to be a little bit special when you opened it up. And of course, I forgot to do that. So don't forget to do that if you want it to have like a pattern in it. So you'll see that I pull it off, which is what I do now. And I didn't have to make a base because the paper that I was using was 80-pound cardstock. It ended up working out just fine. So I believe this was from December Daily, that paper. I can't remember if it was from 2022. I want to say that it was definitely a Paislee press paper. It definitely looks more graphic. I loved it. I love these types of papers, and I wanted to definitely use it on this project. All right, so again, I'm using the score, and what I was thinking that I was going to be able to do is just put it in the center here and, you know, use those scores to be able to fold it down. And what you forget, and I've made books before, so I know this, I understand this. Once you like fold paper and stick them together, like they don't fit together perfectly. So you'll see as I try to score the edge, that front edge, that I can't get a clean edge because when you fold the paper, it wants to stick out. So I'll have to fix it. You'll see as I go through exactly what I'm talking about because the back side's fitting great, but the front side is not going to fit great. But let's table that for a minute. Like I said, you'll see that. But I knew this was pretty bulky and I knew that I would need to close this up. Now you could do something very simple and just use a paper clip. I have these really tiny magnets and I was like, you know, I'm going to use this magnet. They are 1/16 of an inch thin and I can't remember, does it look like 1/4? It might be 1/4 of an inch wide. So they're very thin and it's super easy to hide under paper because it's so thin. And they hold really well because, you know, the paper's not too hard. So it definitely holds together really, really well. So what I'm doing right now is I'm marking the outer edge. You can't really tell that I've got two magnets there sticking to one another, but I'm marking the outer edge, and that's because I've done projects like this before where I put magnets down and then they don't stick to one another because it's two positives together. So I was marking it so I would know that I needed that the outside was the black dot and the portion that was going to adhere to one another was not going to have a dot. Anyway, so at this point, this is when I realized, okay, I'm going to have to do something different with the paper. Instead of having a fold, I'm just going to cut it on the crease and then I'm going to put it in. And that way I am going to have a little bit of a border in between, but it's very, very minimal. And I do create enough of a gutter that I'm able to cleanly fold it in half. So you'll see what I mean by kind of having a gutter. So I did try and stick down one of the magnets and I didn't stick it in the right place. So you'll see me redo that as well. You can see how I've got a little bit of gutter there. That doesn't bother me at all. And it does help it to fold a lot better. Helps it to shut a lot better. All right. I didn't put the magnet in the right place because I forget that I had to cut the one side by like 1/2 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch. So that's why I ended up putting it in the wrong place. So I'm just going to measure maybe 1/2 inch over just so I can, you know, I want it to be on the edge, but it has to be in far enough that I can actually, you know, I could actually adhere the paper around the magnet. So I'm going to pull things back. Luckily, I just used that dot adhesive, so it's a lot easier to do that. And then I'm going to stick it down. Now, this is not as crucial. Well, I guess this is more of a crucial step. You'll see the other side is a little bit easier to do because once the magnets are down, you can kind of like stick the magnets together and then adhering it becomes a little bit easier. So I'm just making markings actually inside the paper so I'll know where to glue it down. I might be doing 1/2 inch in or down and over, if I remember right. That's probably the least important part just because you can kind of get a feel for, you know, where would be the right placement once you like work on the closures, right? So this is me adhering it, making sure that I have the black dots is sticking to the glue. And that way I will know that I'm, you know, putting it in right. I'm telling you, having that positive and negative has totally messed me up. All right, so I'm going to just cut off the edge that was sticking out from the pattern paper. And then I'm going to add I'm going to close it down, lift up the top portion, and then I'm going to put the magnets on, and you'll see, I just got to make sure I get the right ones. See what I mean by it wasn't hooking up with it. So when I folded it down, I just made sure that they're adhered to one another. I put the glue on top, and then I'm just going to fold the paper down. And that way I make sure that the magnets are on top of one another and they're going to close. So like I said, it becomes a lot easier. Once the one magnet is down, all you have to do is just put that paper in between and glue it down, and they are in the same place. You don't have to worry about making sure they're in the same place. All right, so I was just using that acrylic block to hold that down, just so I make sure that everything was adhered together. So now I'm working on the accordion yet again. So like I said, I did print it with the journaling on the bottom, because in Photoshop, I just made a piece that was 2 inches by 6 7/8 and made the markings and printed this and cut it out. All right, now I'm going to add my photo. So I did the same thing with the photo. I just made sure it was the right size. And instead of, like with the pattern paper, instead of folding it, because that would just be way too bulky, I am trimming it down so that it fits in. And of course, it's trial and error, right? I end up having to just keep cutting it off until I feel like it matches and it has a border like the other ones. Now on day 20, I think I talked about having issues with my printer, and this is the same thing. I keep telling myself I'm going to go back and actually reprint this photo because it's very faded and it almost looks a little pinky, you know, like a pinky brown or something. And, you know, honestly, at this point, I'm okay with it. I probably should go back and reprint it now that I have a new printer. But I got it all cut up so it fit in that space perfectly. And then I'm going to, well, at this point, I realized this is day 23. And so I'm grabbing over my numbers. You can see how I have my numbers in Ziploc bags. It's very sophisticated how I've done it. And then the bags are in just one of the December daily boxes that all the supplies come in. So far, that's what I've done. It's mostly at this point holding all of the acrylic and wood numbers that I have created. I will, in the future, maybe this year, put the rest of the numbers in, but I just never had time to do that. So anyway, I ended up swapping for the number 23 since I realized it is definitely going to be 23. So I grabbed over my stickers. I knew I wanted to put something in that spot, you know, something fun, something colorful, something Christmassy. But I also knew that it had to be flat because nothing bulky is going to, you know, fold together and make this all work. So I knew it had to be flat. I really like those stars as well. I could have just done a pattern paper, but I love the idea of a sticker. So I had some tissue paper. This is really pretty tissue paper. I think I got it from Target actually during December. It was probably with all their gift wrap stuff. I always love to look at items like that and use them for different things. But at any rate, I thought that that would be really pretty right there in that spot, kind of mimicking the outside, which was white, and then it had the gold embossing stamps. So I didn't know if you'd be able to see the adhesive underneath, so that's why I stuck the heart down first, and then I just made sure to put the adhesive just underneath the star. And so far, mostly because it's all folded up, I have not had an issue with it at all. It stays put. It looks great. And I really just love that pop of pink and how I just think it fits really great with the day, but also I think it fits really great with the album as well. All right, so I'm actually on a magnetic mat. So you can see when I open that up, those magnets like adhered to the edges really, really well. Okay, so I have slowed everything down again. And that's because I'm going to be adhering this piece. I'm not sure what to call it. This is maybe the structure. It is the piece. So how we're going to do that is we're going to adhere the triangle. Now, the reason why I have it all the way open is because I want to make sure that when the accordion opens, that it opens straight. And when I did it before, when I accidentally did it the first time, I noticed that the accordion was kind of diagonal. So you'll see as I'm putting this down and making sure that the fold is straight, when it folds down, it kind of angles up. So it's not exactly where it needs to be. I mean, it's not perfectly straight, which is fine because when it's folded, you'll never see it. It's when it's open that you want it to be straight. So as you're putting that into the base and it doesn't look like it's straight, you know, that triangle is not pointing straight, it's okay. It's when it's open that we want it to be straight. And if for whatever reason you get it where it's not straight and this piece opens up and it's at a diagonal, it's totally fine. It just has a little bit more character. So not a big deal at all. All right, now that we have that piece onto the base, and I apologize, I'm not really sure what to call it. I'm not an engineer, although I feel like I might have made a really good one because I enjoy this stuff so much. But at any rate, you want to lay the accordion out onto this base piece so that it is vertically centered and horizontally centered. So we really want the top and the bottom to have just as much space poking out. So that way we know for sure when we fold it, it's not going to stick out of the edge. Like I said, everything, all the measurements are very specific for a reason so that they don't stick out of the edge once it's completed. I actually made a marking where, you know, you would fold it down, but honestly, you don't need to do that. What you need to do is once you have it centered, you fold down the top, and then we're going to add glue just, and here's an example of it, just at the base, and at the bottom, you're going to do it to the right. You saw that at the top, I did the glue on the left side. So it's going to be from the center, either from the center to the right, like you would at the bottom, or the center to the left like I did at the top. And you can see that it's askew just a little bit. It's not completely straight. And so I end up pulling up the bottom a little bit just because I wanted to see if I could straighten it out a little bit more. I'm honestly not sure if I did. But like I said, it just adds to the character of your piece if it's not completely straight. And it just reminds everyone that this all is handmade. So not a big deal at all, but this is another example of how I show you. You adhere it on. So from the crease in the middle out, just on the bottom portion is where we're going to adhere it. So it's the bottom right and the upper left. So if you need to go and rewatch that one more time, definitely do. And now that everything's adhered down, just kind of give it a minute for the liquid adhesive. I would definitely encourage you to use liquid adhesive when you're putting this together, just because it makes it a little bit more strong. It has more strength and adheres better together than maybe like the dot adhesive. But you just need to fold it one time and then it will continue to fold. At first, when you're doing it, it feels a little awkward and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work. But once you do it once, you can see that it will always just fold perfectly every single time. So just be gentle as you're folding it for the first time. And if you do it right, then nothing is going to stick out of the edge. All right, so the last thing, well, I guess this is not the very last thing, but one of the last things I'm going to do is adhere the number down. And just using the liquid adhesive again, because it is really, really strong. Like I said, I would definitely encourage that. And then the very last thing that I'm going to do for this page is add the holes. You guys, I love how this turned out. I love trying to figure out a project and seeing it like literally come to life. That is such magic for me. I love it so much, especially when you've worked really hard to get there. And so hopefully you guys will give this a try. And I promise you, I will give you some measurements for a larger one, which I think would be really, really amazing to have like this large accordion like pop out at you if you're using a larger album. So anyway, if you do this project, definitely tag me on Instagram. I would love to see it. All right, so now we are working on day 22. And day 22, although it may seem a little complicated because it ends up being on the back side of day 21, and I need to do that scalloped edge. This is super simple. I actually got this idea for the number from a fellow Instagrammer who's a crafter, paper crafter. She's amazing. I will have her linked below because I don't want to say her name wrong, but I've seen her do this in her December daily for, I feel like she's done this several years, and I really love this idea of having a pattern paper and then having the number popped up. So the pattern that I'm using came from, I think it was one of the papers from the 2022 December daily kit. And like I said, the most challenging part of this, because you'll see that this is a very, very simple day. The most challenging part of this is just trying to get it so the scallop matches up, because I used a silhouette to cut out the number and I didn't know, the measurements of the scallop, and I knew that I would be doing that separate. I'm just trying to make it so it's exact, so it fits perfectly, because I cannot cut anything off the edge of the gratitude day just because my sewing goes right to the edge. So I need this to cut out perfectly. Definitely not something I thought about as before I started working on this. It's like you come up with a design, then you realize, oh yeah, something needs to be on the back side. I could actually have kept all the stitching exposed and maybe had the next day, like this 22, be on top of the stitching, so the stitching you'd see on both sides, but I did not think about that at the time. So I'm just being very precise so I can get everything perfectly. And I do actually get it so it does fit really well because of all the measuring. Now I did leave the top portion uncut because I knew that I could cut that off if it was a little bit too high. And so that was one of the edges that I did leave until the very end. Now you can see that I'm just going to adhere this down. I think there's a little bit of bulk there from the yarn or from the thread. I'm going to cut that off and then adhere everything down. I do actually glue that paper onto the thread because I didn't add any of the adhesive onto it, and it did pop up a little bit because it was so thick. So you'll see that I end up adding some adhesive there. And now I'm just going to cut off that top portion. And really, like I said, that's the hardest part. It's done. And now I'm going to take this stacked 22. So I stacked several white pieces together because I wanted it to pop off the page. I actually wish I had done a few more. I think it would have looked even cooler if it popped a little bit off the page even more. And then I put the pattern paper on top of that, and then I'm just going to fit it in. Of course, I do want to do that piece in the center. Make sure when you're doing something like this to keep all the little pieces together, because you're not going to want to have to cut it again. And I stuck that down in, and you can see that it's very subtle, but you can see that number popping through because of the white. And I love this. Such a great idea. If you're not following this woman, definitely do. She has a lot of really fun ideas, especially for December daily. And again, I'm sorry that I don't know how to say her name, but I will have it linked. All right. So because you could see the white background behind the holes, I was thinking about maybe putting gold. I don't think that I did actually end up doing that, but I was considering it. All right, so the other part of 22 is this card that says all I need, and there's a checklist, and I put a nap because by day 22, that's exactly what I need is a nap. And then I paired it with this card. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I believe that is from several December dailies ago. And then I'm just going to, I stuck them back to back, and then I'm just going to punch out the holes. And you guys, that means I'm done with day 22. And like I said, day 22, it could not have been a more simple story. It didn't include photo. I don't feel like I always have to include photos, but I just love that it told a complete story just by saying, all I want is a nap. That's an amazing card. If you do not have that card, that would be a really easy card to make. You could even write that out by hand. So anyway, you guys, that is going to be it for days 22 and 23. I know that it was a lot longer of a video than I normally do, but I wanted to make sure to slow some things down so that you could really see what I was doing. I'm trying to think what I'm doing right now. Oh yeah, for this card, I definitely want to put one of the little tabs on the edge. So I grab over my stickers. I love these tab stickers so much. I think it says good times. And I think I ended up cutting the edge off a little bit because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfectly adhered to one another. Kind of silly. But anyway, I put that tab on, and then I am done, right? So I hope you guys will give one of these days a try for sure. Day 23. I just think it is so fun to have something like that in your album. So if you can, definitely give it a try. Of course, like always, I will have everything that I used, if I can find it, linked below. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for supporting my channel, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye.